Hey, it's OJ, and it's time for a glass of OJ. Today I want to talk about passwordless technologies. I've been seeing it more and more on Twitter now, and LinkedIn, but for some reason, especially on Twitter, vendors with passwordless technology seem to really like using the passwordless hashtag and putting promotions on Twitter. And it sparked a bit of wonderment in me as I started thinking about this technology of passwordless, because we've had these for a while. We've had passwordless technology for a while. Passwordless technology is essentially taking other means of authentication besides a password in order to authenticate you. So instead of, say, a username and password, you would use your username, but then you would have some type of auth token or facial recognition, thumbprint recognition. You would have maybe behavior-based authentication. So maybe you authenticate with one factor to log in, but then based on how you behave or how you type on the keyboard and the signals that get sent to the computer, that determines then on a continuous basis whether you're maybe the same person. Maybe someone, and when you went off to the bathroom and forgot to lock your computer, stepped up and started typing, but their fingers type differently than yours do. And so they go, hey, whoa, you're not Beth Ann. We're going to shut you down, and you've got to log back in. And so if you don't have Beth Ann's token, if you don't have Beth Ann's face, then you're not allowed to get back on Beth Ann's computer. So these have existed for a while. The behavior-based stuff has been more of a modern development, but facial recognition's been around for quite a while. Thumbprint resignation. Why do I keep saying resignation? Recognition. You just resign with a thumbprint. It's been around for a while, right? So why is passwordless coming up? And really, it's becoming a bit of a transformation in the markets. It's becoming a good transformation in the way users want to be able to access their applications. They're really tired of working with their passwords. They're really tired of entering in and having to come up with brand new passwords every time they get into something new. Even password managers, in many cases, become inconvenient because maybe you don't have your mobile phone with you, but you need to be able to get into your account on something, and you can't remember that password because it's a 99-character password stuck in Dashlane or LastPass or something else. So obviously, it would be really nice to have strong authentication without the password. Of course, in order for passwords to be strong, we all have seen the XKCD comic where, it's not the complexity of the password that makes a password really strong. It's, of course, the length. And so, a 16-character password with very little complexity is actually a much stronger password than one that is actually longer. Shorter. So let's say you had 16-character password, low complexity, and you had a 10-character password with high complexity. Well, that 10-character password is going to get solved really quickly compared to the 16-character password because it's exponential, and that exponent is determined based on how many characters are in that password. So that's what goes in that exponent. So it's exponential entropy is what it's called. Anyway, so those are really long passwords. They're hard to make. They're hard to keep. They're hard to remember and figure out exactly how they work. Not all websites also allow you to autofill passwords, so that becomes very tough. But especially for corporate passwords, people are getting tired of having to load in their password and remember it, change it every 90 days or 60 days, whenever the interval is. We're just going to add another exclamation mark, or we're going to add another one or something to it, right, folks? So it leads to bad practice. And then, of course, once your credentials are compromised, then you've got to go back and change through everything. So it's really terrible. So passwordless is basically saying, well, let's use these other factors that we have, and we're going to try to make these way more convenient for the user. We're going to try to use that. I like that. That is a fantastic idea, and I am full in favor of that, as long as you're using two factors. I did a previous video on why faces are actually not a good replacement for passwords if it's a single factor. Thumbprints are not a good replacement for passwords if it's a single factor. Passwords are still awesome for single factor authentication. Passwords are still better for single factor authentication. Better than passwords, in my opinion, would be a certificate, something you would have on a card, a USB drive, something else that would basically insert, or you'd have a TPM or something. That would be a far better single-factor authentication amongst all of those, because that's a really large secret, if you will, that you don't have to remember. That can be changed, that can be rotated, it can be recreated, and you don't have to worry about it. So there's a lot more ease that can go with that. Key management becomes an issue, and a lot of people are very weak on PKI, so that becomes an issue. But supposing all that's good, some of the passwordless advertisements I've seen on Twitter, some of the passwordless demonstrations I've seen on LinkedIn are actually very disappointing, and have me questioning what some of these evangelists kind of think is passwordless. I'll give you the example. So it shows user coming up to their login screen, and then it kind of goes to a cartoon of the user pulling out their USB drive. It's like a YubiKey, and they're plugging directly into the laptop. And then what pops up? Please enter your PIN. Derp. That's a password. Another word for PIN, which, by the way, doesn't have to be a number. It can be words. That's a password. And so I've argued this point. But then something finally hit me with what someone was bringing up. It was that it is passwordless in the way that a system administrator, IT department, company does not have to actually manage the PIN. It does not have to manage that password, that secret that unlocks the token. Okay. I will agree. Those types of systems are passwordless from the perspective of the person who has to manage authentication. So that password would not be stored in Active Directory. That password would not be transmitted over any authentication source. That password is completely and utterly transmitted between your fingers and that token that's right there. It's a completely local, on the machine based authentication, and it doesn't touch the operating system in such a way that it actually goes into a cache or it goes into something to actually unlock that token. It's passwordless from that perspective. However, me as a user, I hear a corporate, movement to say, let's get rid of passwords. Oh, yes. Thank goodness. Getting rid of these passwords. I'm tired of making these passwords. Thank you so much, OJ, for making me get rid of my password. This is so awesome. Token. Okay, this is great. So I just got to keep this with me, just like my badge. And then I just plug this in. Wonderful. And I plug it in and... Wait, what's that? It's a PIN. So I have to remember a PIN? I have to remember... That's a password. So this isn't passwordless. I could see that conversation going on very easily with users and even executives who just don't understand, how is this passwordless if I, as a user, have to now work with this password. And that's the thing too, is you're actually passing off management of the password from when you use it in that way. And you do not have to use it in that way. And we'll get to that in just a moment. You do not have to use a password to unlock the token. If you're using a hardware token. Drink some OJ. What's happening is you don't have to have management of AD or IAM. They're not the ones who have to manage the password. So they're not the ones dictating how long it has to be. They're not dictating, how long you can use it. There may be some token enrollments or some token management that ends up being able to pop up for a user saying, hey, by the way, your PIN seems to be old. Would you like to reset your PIN on the token? And since you've already authenticated through it, you can go ahead and reset your PIN because maybe you have that endpoint agent. Endpoint agents on your system. Maybe you've got something, a piece of software that lets you reset your token PIN. But you don't have to manage that as an administrator. You have to manage that as a user. And so, to me, you really can't call it passwordless in those types of situations, because you're using a password. Now, where it can be passwordless is where there are technologies where you're allowed to put in your what's that called? It's called a token, a hardware token, a YubiKey. And you put your token in. It's either a smart card, it's a USB, it's something, and then it says use the thumbprint scanner to unlock the token. I'm in favor of that. That's fine. That's actually really great because I always have that password with me. Now, you can go back to one of my previous videos where I talk about thumbprint and facial recognition as a replacement for passwords, because those same problems that are associated with face and also thumbprint, the fact that this never changes, well, it does change, and that's a problem in and of itself. But also, as I've been drinking my glass of OJ, right there, I've got my password, or I've got my secret. I've got something here. I've got authentication material right here that someone can pick up and use. I'm doing it every time I pick up this glass, every time I trade it, every time I pick up something else on this table. I am leaving that material for authentication to open my token everywhere. And you could say very easily, okay, OJ, but in order for someone to need to use your thumbprint, they would need to steal your token and copy it somehow. And then they would also need to take the thumbprint. So they'd need to do a physical attack. And that's actually a great point, because what's the number one way passwords get compromised? It's not because someone picked up a keyboard or mouse and looked under it and saw the password. No. It's not because someone read through, a password book. No, it's usually because they dumped creds out of Twitter. They dumped creds out of some other, some other group. They were messing around inside your company's environment, and sure enough, you have your password in an Excel spreadsheet. So yeah, that's definitely where your authentication is, and that's where your compromises happen. Thumbprints. 20,000 employee environment, even if you have a 50 employee environment, you're going to steal 50 employees' thumbprints. Good luck. So it makes it that much harder for an adversary to have to get the authentication material. And of course, in order to unlock that key, you need some authentication or some type of secret material in order to get that to unlock. And in this case, you would use a thumbprint. I think that's great. That's a great passwordless system. And yes, thumbprints do change over time. Our thumbs swell due to humidity and pressure in the winter and in the summer. They can swell and contract. So there's a lot of things our thumbs can do. We can get a cat and have it scratch our thumb and be pretty bad. And maybe that's enough to mess up the data, right? And of course, you can maybe have a few different, I don't know if tokens actually do this, but you may have a few different, maybe 2 different fingerprints, right? Maybe this thumbprint and this thumbprint. So that way, just in case this thumb gets mangled or something, or changes or gets scratched up or something, you've maybe got another. You've got 9 other digits here that we can work with and you can use for authentication. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Those are fantastic things that people are starting to adopt and start to look towards. And it plays into zero trust quite a bit, because the first step on the way to zero trust really is to get strong authentication, strong identity management along with that. So now you also have to worry about role-based authentications or role-based authorizations for how you manage access to different places. But strong authentication, being able to, with high confidence, tell that OJ is actually OJ logging in, is very important. And passwords have been very good at what they do, but they're not very convenient to maintain. Once compromised, it takes very little time then to attack a system. Whereas when you start moving to passwordless, the authenticating material It's a lot harder to get your hands on. Someone has to be, it raises that level of attack that you have to worry about, because then the level of attack you have to worry about is more nation state, very much targeted to one person or two people. And usually starts meaning that you have to have physical vicinity. Facial recognition can be beaten a little bit through photos and other types of things. I've even seen some 3D photos that some people take where it allows you to kind of look at different parts of the face. I think we talked about before how that could be made into a 3D printed sculpture of someone's face, especially if you've got enough data on it. You know, a 3D printed, a 3D picture or some type of two camera system picture of your face can probably recreate a three-dimensional look of that face and can possibly be 3D printed. So even if it's a matter of a flat image, you can reproduce that flat image appropriately for a camera with a little 3D printing. It's actually been done. People have tried doing that, and it can work. So it kind of just depends on how well they've been keeping up with that attack vector. But yeah, so if you're looking for passwordless technology, if you're looking for passwordless methods of authentication, I would recommend, if you want to call it passwordless, I would recommend against using a PIN for your hardware token. But at the end of the day, even that is better authentication than just using your password. I would just prefer you not call it passwordless, but those are just my thoughts. And that's a glass of OJ. Have you drunk yours today? Now you have.